right, good afternoon. How's everybody doing? Are we all still awake? Good. There's been some awesome presentations. For those of you who have presented, thank y'all. This has been so cool. For those of you who have been attending, I hope you've been enjoying it as much as I have. It's been pretty fantastic. Can everybody hear me pretty well? Okay, I have a loud voice, so I try to talk quietly in here. Otherwise, it doesn't work out. All right, well, hi. My name is Brad Rossacci with 900 Pounds of Creative. We are a creative studio and innovation lab. So I'm going to kind of get y'all started today. Just a little quick story. It's better to show than tell, I've learned, and see a little bit about who we are. I always love that graphic at the end. That's done by an artist by the name of Mark Moore. He designed the Iron Man mask and worked on some of the Star Wars projects. So pretty cool dude. He did that last little piece for us. But yeah, as I mentioned, Brad Rossacci, we are 900 Pounds of Creative. We're an innovation lab and creative studio. We started about 8 years ago on the content and visual side of the world and have, I would like to say slowly, but it hasn't felt very slowly, evolved into this kind of ecosystem that plays a lot with emerging technologies as tools, as we like to say. So I always like to really kick off with why I get out of bed every day. And so it truly is to inspire innovation and really engage all of us in a way that's really dynamic and organic to really activate the exponential ripple, as we like to say. We hear things like putting a dent in the universe and other thought leaders that have ideas around that. I think that's kind of mean personally to put a dent in the universe. So I'd rather activate a ripple. I feel like that's a little more positive and can have more value. So we try to surf that ripple pretty effectively every day. And, as we think about the human experience, which we'll talk about a little bit today, it's so enticing, but kind of insane, right? I mean, think about it. We have so much information. We have so much data. We have so much happening on a daily basis that it can be a little overwhelming, right? There's so much going on. I saw a Harvard Business Review stat. We're never more than 15 feet away from our devices 85% of the time. I mean, mine's in my back pocket right now. We have to be connected, right? It's just this sense of we can't be socially disconnected, and we'll get into that more in a moment. But just think as we're going through this today, like, what are those distractors for you? Like, disruption's awesome and it can be really powerful, but distraction can be really bad because it keeps us away from evolving and developing as people. And this human experience is awesome, but it can be kind of terrifying. And so a lot of our work and research comes from perspectivism, which is Friedrich Nietzsche's philosophy around perspectivism. And so we like to think about it from our limited mind's perspective around this idea of, from any one moment, any of us can see something in a particular way, but someone may be able to see it in a more dynamic or more compelling way that others just aren't able to understand or see the same solution. One of my very favorite examples comes from Foldit. If you're not familiar with Foldit, there were a group of scientists, I think there were 15 of them, there were not 15 of them. They worked on this problem for about 15 years. There was a cancerous protein strand they were working really diligently to solve, right? And so they got together, they gamified it, put it onto an online platform, and a group of gamers got a hold of it. No scientific background whatsoever. Solved it in 12 days. It is incredible, right? People that have no scientific background solved a 15-year problem in 12 days. It just blows my mind every time I think about it. And so much of that way of thinking goes into who we are as an organization and what we do from a science-driven perspective. And so again, just things to be thinking about as we're talking today. I'm going to use some terminology that is going to feel a little unfamiliar. So just know that going into it. Please don't get too much hung up on that. Come talk to me afterwards and I can dive into anything more in detail. But think about design today. Think about the human experience. Think about design and how those elements really do come together to be powerful and dynamic tools. And so I talked a moment ago, right, about this whole idea of kind of being terrified with this human experience, right? It can kind of be a little bit insane. One of my favorite fears is nomophobia, right? And it's basically the fear of being disconnected. But what's so awesome about this fear is it's nothing new. Y'all, this is a primitive behavior that goes back to the origins of man and woman, where we had to be connected to one another because the moment we were disconnected, we weren't safe. And so it goes back to the most basic primitive need of feeling safe. It goes back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Just needing to be secure, knowing that we have food on the table, knowing that we don't have to worry about basic requirements. And while these things may not seem like, what does that have to do with design? It has everything to do with design because it has everything to do with the human experience, which has everything to do with all of us. And so far too often, we start to notice that the human experience is kind of being disrupted and distracted. And so I want to run through a quick case study that is going to give a cool perspective on kind of what is this human experience thing and why does it matter in design.
People are born to live their lives. I'm born to dance. Want me to work like a dog in a full-time job? Haha, I'm born to dance. Don't wear no coat, no tie, no shirt, and even no pants. I'm born to dance. You shaking your head? Well, I'll be shaking my ass, cause I'm born to dance. I wanna shake it and shake it and shake it, shake it and shake it, girl. Do you wanna shake it? I wanna shake it and shake it and shake it, shake it and shake it, yo. Watch me dance now. My favorite.
Smart.
So the thing that I love most about this case study is 81% more people stopped at the traffic light, and people actually had fun making sure that happened. But why is that relevant, right? Well, brain pattern. This goes back to pretty basic elements. Brain pattern, right? That's how we think. Well, the moment that we interrupt brain pattern, we stop, right? So they literally used science to drive this design process to make sure that they could interrupt brain pattern in something that was unfamiliar. Because it's not familiar to walk and see a dancing traffic light. But when you build those elements into the design process, then it ensures that entire experience is more organic and more natural, but it's a much more innovative, creative way of thinking about it. It really is design thinking 101. It's how is it going to benefit the end user themselves and make sure that that experience is dynamic and compelling for them. And this is really why our formula exists. And so today we're going to be talking about human innovation science. And interesting story on kind of how this all came together. So a few years ago, we're doing some research and investigation into employee engagement and gamification science. And so for those of you who are familiar with both of those, awesome. For those of you who are not, I'll give like a 4-second explanation of them. Gamification science is essentially taking those game elements and putting them into to non-game environments, and it deals with stimulus, action, and reward, as well as variable reward. And so how do we build that in a way that is compelling and dynamic, but also simple and easy to understand? Where we started getting exciting was in the research seeing things around dopamine. And we're like, what? Like neuroscience, bringing that into this type of process is just amazing. How cool. And equally seeing it in employee engagement, and not as positive of a way. With employee engagement, we have about 70 to 73% of our workforce who's either disengaged or actively disengaged. And that actively disengaged population kind of became a passion project of ours because they're twice as likely to suffer from depression. So that means we have 18% of the workforce who hates coming to work every day, who doesn't see the value in why they exist in their roles. And I don't know how many of you are in here in that position, and not to do a survey, but just if you are, think about that. That sucks. You shouldn't feel that way. You should love getting out of bed every day. It should drive you. It should motivate you. It should inspire you, because we're here to change the world, people. And if we're not able to do that in our work, where we spend the majority of our time, then what are we doing? And serotonin kept coming up over and over again in our literature reviews. And we're going like, wow, this is ridiculous that they're seeing twice as likely to suffer from depression. Serotonin levels are being impacted. This is not a good thing. And then it kind of just sparked an idea, right? Go back to perspectivism. And we said, if it works in gamification and we're seeing it in employee engagement, why can't we take similar elements and quantify the science and put it into the design process? And so that's exactly what we did. So welcome to the first tier of human innovation science, which is called experiential biology. And so this system actually takes into consideration neuroscience coupled with sensory engagement and cognitive discovery. And so we developed this first piece and got really excited about it and decided, you know what, this is it. This is the means to the end. We've solved all the world's problems. We can go home now. But we found out that wasn't exactly the case, because environment is a really critical factor of the design process. And so we had to look more in depth around what are the different factors of an environment that we need to take into consideration. But before we get there, as we're thinking about things like neuroscience and sensory, and some of these may not feel overly innovative, if you will, in their natural sense, but the coupling of them together can really help drive this process forward. And so we're not going to get into a ton of detail today. If you have questions, please come talk to me afterwards. But just think about it as, take neuroscience as a way to drive the human experience, quantify neuroscience so that you can build these elements into the design process. So if you think about something like endorphins, right, and incorporating variability into your design process, according to the research, will actually help you make sure that you can increase the level of engagement and the level of interactivity by using the science to drive that process. Pretty fun stuff, right? And so another thing that we got excited about and we're trying to understand more is when we look at innovation, because this is kind of a buzzword today, for us it's a very huge part of our business and who we are as people, and so we don't like to think of it in the traditional sense, but it is a big part of our formula, and so we do call it out. And so we started asking this question around, how has innovation happened over time? How is it that all of these wonderful things continue to happen consistently, and it's not new? It's not something that, innovation isn't a new thing. It's the innovations that are so brilliant and exciting. This has been happening since literally stone became a tool, right? That was an emerging technology at one point in time, right? And it literally changed our jaw structure. It changed who we are as beings, and it allowed us to eat meat in a way we never had before. And thanks to fire, we were able to actually cook the meat and enjoy the wonderful aromas. Sorry, vegetarians. And it really helped that experience become more adaptable. My wife's vegetarian, so I'm very empathetic of that. And so here's some of the really fun behaviors that came out of that investigation. And this is by no means an exhaustive list, but it is some of my favorites. That of empathy, ordinary thinking, which is probably top of the list, and storytelling. Those are probably my top three favorites personally. They're all wonderful. You know, when we think of ordinary thinking, I don't know how many of y'all are familiar with Disney's RFID bands that they use, but that's really a very old technology. That's essentially around a World War II type of technology. That's a very low frequency and has, in today's current society, with all the integration of Internet of Things and digital elements and all these components, has become a really core part of what we do every day. But it took a group of people sitting in a room and thinking about this in a way that was simple. They didn't overcomplicate it. They didn't take it to a level that was like, let's build a rocket ship. But instead, let's take a really basic thing that is very common in our society and build it into the design process. And so just one quick fun example there of those behaviors. So another thing that we've learned is really important with using these behaviors. So these are both things that we use in our design process as well as a way for others to learn about innovation and how to be more innovative in the ways in which they evolve and grow as designers and as people as well. And then rolling that up into a formula we found to be was very important. So essentially quantifying what we had already been quantifying, I guess is what it kind of became. And so basically you need three things in order for innovation to happen according to the studies and research that we've done. And it's basically you need an opportunity, you need a challenge, and it needs to create an outcome. And as basic as that seems, that essentially was the simplest way possible that we could summarize the research around innovation over time and how all of these behaviors roll up and what really needs to happen, what that spark is to make it come to life. And so one of the things I mentioned a moment ago was around the environment, right? So we call this performance anthropology. The reason we call it performance anthropology is because we're huge proponents of human performance coupled with organizational anthropology, kind of bringing those elements together into the design process so we can really understand the environment. I am not a fan of demographics. They're, in my opinion, very organizational maps that are not really helping us understand users today. We've actually been finding more research around baby boomers and millennials having extremely similar behavioral patterns. If we look at demographic mapping, it actually limits the potential for us to understand our users and the environment of the users and can completely mitigate the true brilliance of any given environment. It's much more beneficial to do an organic assessment of a specific environment and customize the design requirements based on the users that are in that population, which gives you a more cohesive and more comprehensive view and lens into that actual landscape. And so essentially that becomes performance anthropology. So that's pretty much the scientific process that we use. We are an organization that believes very much in using science to drive design because we want things to be organic. We want things to look and feel as natural as they possibly can because all of us deserve that. We deserve for design to work for us in the way that we think, function, operate, and live our lives every day. And by doing this, we can all work together to make everything that we know and understand in our environment to be more impactful and drive us further so that we can do more together. We call those Mars shots. There's a lot of conversation around moon shots, and I'm all about moon shots, but we've already been to the moon, so I kind of feel like it's going back to the 1960s, whereas Mars shots take us forward to where we are yet to explore and go. So we always want to be thinking ahead about where we're going. So want to jump into a case study real quick. Let's see, time-wise, I want to make sure we're going good there. Are there any questions? I know that was a lot of information. I don't mind pausing for a moment to kind of have some ideation going. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah, that's awesome. And so that's where performance anthropology becomes very central to our design process because it's totally mapping that environment, both from using intrinsic behavior, so how we see ourselves, and extrinsic behavioral mapping as well, to make sure that we're observing the environment accurately. And then from there, we group users into categories based on that specific environment. Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. So we'll jump into a great question. Thank you. We'll jump into one of our case studies. I put at the top there. I'll race you to the top, and you'll kind of understand why, hopefully, by the end of it.
Hewlett-Packard Enterprise is a technology company focused on delivering solutions for our customers. And the reason we're here is services, unlike a product that you might sell or software that you might load into your laptop or into your hardware, services is something that's not tangible. So we have to do whatever we can to bring services to life, to make them real for our customers. And that's what we're able to do here in the experience.
This experience is a way for our clients and guests to understand the many aspects of Hewlett-Packard Enterprise and what we bring to the market. and more importantly, how they work together to propel their business further. So we had some interactive elements in our center already, but I think this new demonstration takes that a million times further, and that's going to be a differentiator when we talk to our clients and find out how to get to their business outcomes the best way.
We used an expedition metaphor because, as with any business landscape, there are going to be challenges and obstacles along the way, and you work together as a team to conquer those. You have to utilize the right tools to reach your objectives.
Working with 900 pounds has, I think, been the better part of a year since I first met Steve, and we've been through the trenches together. It's been a true partnership, and you don't find that easily.
Since I've been here, and I've been here in this facility for quite a long time, this is the most involved of the upgrades that we've done here to the experience.
The technology includes an 11-foot by 4-foot interactive touch table and 18-foot by 6-foot curved rear projection screens. It's a truly immersive experience. We would really like to thank the HP team for making us a part of this unique vision. 900 Pounds is proud to be a part of such a custom, multi-sensory experience.
So I mentioned early on about emerging technologies as tools, and I cannot stress that enough. Really, it's so much fun to get into an ideation session and do some design thinking and brainstorm and throw stuff at the wall, and we love doing that part, of course. That's awesome. It's always with the idea in mind, though, how do we make this an effective tool for the business landscape of the organizations that we're working with? Because that is the most critical and important thing for us, is to make sure that it meets, achieves, and eventually what we call activates optimal outcome, getting to the highest level of outcome using science, using the design process to get to that point for our customers. And so to give you a little backstory on this, essentially, a customer came to us and they said, hey, we have these services, and there's about 7 or 8 of them, and we kind of sort of use like visual graphic representation right now to show them like a cloud of sorts to show cloud computing. However, that's generally as far as we can take it at this point. How do we elevate that? How do we bring that design into a more robust, compelling experience for our users, for our customers, our internal stakeholders, as well as our external stakeholders, so that it feels like, wow, that's memorable. That's something that's going to be sticky, right? And so that process led us to the point where we were able to create this immersive, interactive experience through the design process. And so the mountain is essentially a metaphor of the business landscape, the journey that you take throughout your business life cycle, if you will. And there's certain barriers that come up along the way. One of the biggest requirements, too, was getting the alpha female, alpha male complex out of the way, because you're generally coming in with your C-level suite executives. And I don't know about any of you, but prior to my role now, when I was in a room with executives, I tended to cower under their role, naturally, out of respect for them. And if we did that in an experience like this, that would not be the greatest thing, because we're not getting a true experience for all users. So we created an ambassador role, or we utilized an ambassador role that the organization had already developed for other parts of their experience, and put them as the lead, as the head of that experience, and put everybody else on a level playing field. So really thinking through those human experience elements to make sure that it achieved optimal outcome. And the very first thing you come across is there's a break in the ice, and so you have to, it kind of forces organic collaboration, because each of you have different sets of tools in your buckets, and so you have to decide which tools you're going to use. And so one of you has a ladder, and you're like, oh, I have the ladder, and then someone else is like, oh, hey, cool, I have, the ice pick, and so on and so forth. And then the content engages with you as you make those decisions, and then audio track adjusts and the lighting adjusts based on decision making and mood to really heighten the senses and reinforce that, yes, good job, you made the right choice, or no, you did not make the right choice on that decision. Any questions on that one before we move forward? Because I know that one's a pretty fun one. Yes, sir.
We made like a control room type of area to show off HP services.
Yeah, and kind of bring them to life, so that it felt. And then about halfway through, there's actually a metaphorical reveal. So then you go back to the expedition using the business landscape as opposed to just using the mountainous metaphor. So you're getting to see it both in the metaphor and then as well in the actual business landscape. So you can kind of select like protect, for example, and it'll walk you back through that journey. So the thing that I'm learning more and more about the human experience is we still like to touch things. That's a really important sense. And technology is awesome, and we're clearly huge proponents of it, but we always talk at our studio about how we don't want to become the Wall-E's of the world. Right? If you've never seen Wall-E, essentially over time, our entire bone structure evolves, and we all just kind of like walk around. We don't walk, we just sit in these chairs and move around in this weird kind of way, right? And we don't want that to be the reality. So it's really using technology as a tool to drive our human experience forward and evolve the human experience. It's not to eventually just be all technology driven, because that needs to be a tool, but that's not the only part of the human experience that's important. So I love this case study because this is using technology in a way that still engages what's physical, what we can touch, print in this example. And so a huge driver for this experience is to really keep print alive. We don't want print necessarily to die because, again, being able to physically touch something is a really cool and awesome experience. I don't know how many of you have seen Microsoft's productivity video that they've done, but it's one of my favorites. It basically looks at human experience design, and it's incorporating things like Internet of Things and digital layers and kind of bringing it all together in a way that's seamless and organic. One of the case studies actually goes through this story of this young girl, and then there's this executive at this company, and she essentially finds her on LinkedIn or some social platform, and then is able to connect with her. I believe it's in Beijing, and it comes up on her smart device, and she goes to this co-working space, and she works on the project. And there's actually this movement happening right now where that's really becoming a reality. There's this freelancer movement that's going on that's kind of hitting an exponential rate of change right now. It's very small at the moment, but it is really erupting. For those of you who are not familiar with Moore's Law, it's the exponential rate of change over time, something to definitely Google and check out. Very cool stuff. And so you think about things like this freelancer movement. You think about things like keeping print alive and evolving it so that it becomes more dynamic and more compelling and still allows us to interact and engage with the physical world through those digital layers that we can build on top of it. It can be a very powerful way to add technology into our human experience and human system in that design process. Any questions on this one before we jump forward? Cool. So this is one of my favorite projects that we've been working on. It's, from a design perspective, pretty cool stuff. This company, Fast Forward Analytics, they are a cognitive neuroscience, applied mathematics, and computational physics company. Now that's a mouthful, right? And they use all these really cool stuff to align people with the right careers, because so often that doesn't happen, right? We go back to like employee engagement. And so, as you know, that's a passion project of ours. And so getting to work with groups like this is just really exciting. So cognitive neuroscience assessments are nothing new. They go back a very long time. I was actually reading a study this morning about some from the 1930s, the 1950s, and obviously they go further back than that. And being able to take those amazing studies and evolve them in a way that aligns with our landscape, with the language that we speak now, is really important. And so that's where we came into the conversation with this experience, is really being able to take the digital, the interactive, the gamification, that those design elements, and build that through cognitive neuroscience based assessments in a more interactive and dynamic way made a lot of sense. And so this experience is measuring those elements of whatever behavioral assessment they need to get out of it, anywhere from a variety of behaviors to understanding the digital landscape and the landscape of the users so that they can match them with the right career role for them. So very exciting, very important to be thinking always forward on how can we take the wonderful things that those before us have developed and evolve them to match with the landscape of today. And so that's what I have for today. Activate optimal outcome, everyone.